Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the AudaCity Velocity OKC show. I'm Nate Fisher. I'm the Director of Communications here at the Greater OKC Chamber.
And I'm Kaylee Terracina. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager also at the Chamber. We're glad you're here. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. And if you are back for a second time, thanks so much for returning. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. So what are we going to be talking about today, Kaylee?
Well, a quick rundown of what we have on the agenda. First, we're going to go over some cool things that we have found in Oklahoma City recently. We're also going to talk about how to get involved at the Oklahoma River. We're going to give you a preview of the Maps 4 presentations. And then we're also going to have a special guest, Derek Sparks, our Government Relations Manager at the Chamber. He's going to give us a quick overview of how the 2019 legislative session went for pro-business legislation, education reform, criminal justice reform, all kinds of fun topics. So you'll have to keep watching for that. And of course, we'll have a rundown on the side so you can see what to expect. Why don't you kick us off? I know you had a fun experience with Spokies recently. I want you to tell us more about that.
Yeah, so Spokies, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Spokies is the city's bike share program that's run by Embark, who's the same folks that do the OKC streetcar and the bus system. So sort of our Metro Transit system. Public transit system. Awesome. We've had Spokies for a while, which was a bike share system where you would check out a bike from a dock and then you would ride it wherever you wanted to go, and then you would check it back into a specific dock, and those are strategically placed around the city. There's a new product that they have, which is called Spokies Dash, and those are essentially dockless Spokies. So it's really nice. You don't actually have to return them back to a specific dock or a specific location.
Gives you a lot more freedom, it seems like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're familiar with the Lime scooters, it's the same sort of idea. And in fact, the pricing structure is very similar. You check it out with the app.
Awesome.
Just like you do with the Lime scooters. It's $1 to start, and I believe it's 12 cents a minute after that.
Gotcha. So have you taken one out, kind of explored? I know you're kind of our downtown dude.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, I like to not drive as much as possible.
He stays in his bubble. It's fine.
You're right. I have a very small bubble around town that I stay in, and I try not to ever drive whenever I don't have to, especially during the summer. I actually don't drive all that often. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last few summers I've never had to get gas during
Are you
summer.
kidding me? Yeah. That's incredible. Wow.
I'm very,
awesome. Very impressed with you right now.
I've got a nice little setup going. But yeah, so it was fun. So there was a Spokies Dash that was parked very close to where I live in the Deep Deuce area. Yeah. And I was going to take a ride out to Anthem Brewery, one of my favorite spots.
Absolutely.
And try some beers and hang out for a little bit. And so I checked that out and rode that down there.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was really nice. Stayed on bike lanes for a good portion of the route, which is easy to do in the downtown area. We've got a lot more bike lanes than we used to.
Absolutely,
so that's nice.
Yeah. It seems like they're always adding new ones too, which is great.
Right.
And especially considering the location. I mean, streetcar is great when you're going north and south, but this allows you to have a little more freedom when it's not directly on the streetcar line. So I'm sure that made it a lot easier to get around.
Yeah, for sure. And it's cool too because if you pull it up on the app, it's very, very similar to the way that the Lime scooters work, but you can see where the available bikes are on the map, and so you can see if there's one close to you or if
So how far out can you take these?
Well, they do have a.
Could I go to Lake Hefner? Could I, just go crazy?
You would want to go to Lake Hefner.
Probably not. Yeah, that's a little more than my fitness level would require. So better avoid that.
They're cruisers. They're not road bikes by any stretch of the imagination, but they are utilitarian in the sense that. So I went to Anthem, had a few beers, and I bought a 6-pack, and I put that right in the basket and drove it home. So
that's just what the bicycle basket was made for. I think.
The basket is appropriately sized for a 6-pack, so that is good news for all of us craft beer fans around.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
very
so
cool.
Check out the Spokies Dash.
Give that a try.
They're pretty cool, for sure.
Awesome.
Okay, so and you had something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I was actually doing research recently. We have a blog for people who are moving to Oklahoma City on abetterlifeokc.com. And I was writing a little bit more about the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. And I know when people hear about museums, they think, oh, this is something fun for visitors to experience. Well, I'm here to tell you that residents have plenty of opportunities to enjoy Oklahoma City's museums, and of course the Cowboy Museum is one of those. So they have this really cool series called the Saloon series. Mm-hmm. Once a month, they bring in different alcohol, beverages. They have a tasting class. This month in July, it's going to be tequila. So they're going to bring in a tequila expert, have specialty cocktails, live music. That's coming up on the 18th of July from 6 to 8. And if you buy your tickets in advance online, they're $25, $30 at the door. It just seemed like a really great way to enjoy our museums, but also kind of learn something new and experience, different people in Oklahoma City that you might not otherwise connect with.
Right. And plus, you know what they say about tequila.
What do they say? It's dangerous?
Tequila makes you dance. So.
I'm sure, I mean, the live music would also help with that. So
For sure.
Seems like you'd have lots of opportunity to two-step if you wanted to. So
Yeah, and there are a lot of, sometimes we were talking earlier about how sometimes people think of some of our museums as, visitor attractions, and, maybe we'll go when there's a new exhibition or something like that. But there are a lot of ongoing programs like this that happen that a lot of our museums put on. The film program that the Museum of Art downtown does is a good example of one of those things.
Especially like around Oscar time, they always have the Oscar-nominated films and just basic art films, anything that might be a little unique or harder to see in cinemas elsewhere, they'll show there, which is really fun if you're into that kind of thing. So, and even the Cowboy Museum does something similar too. So they'll have Westerns playing throughout the year, which I think is pretty fun.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that we wanted to talk about today is rowing. So the rowing season, the corporate rowing season, is getting ready to start again.
Yep, that's right. It feels like pretty much at any point throughout the calendar year, you could be rowing if you wanted to, whether or not you're on the Oklahoma River is, dependent on if it's winter or not, but you can definitely get involved at the river if you want to.
You can.
We have both been on the Corporate Rowing League in our past, so what's the best way for us to get involved with that if people are interested in learning how to row?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually have a pretty good story about some different ways to get involved down at the river and how to get started rowing if that's something that you have been interested in and interested in finding out about on velocityokc.com that Molly Fleming, one of our new folks here, has put together. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. So I think that was pretty informative. But essentially, there are two different ways that you can take advantage of in order to get involved with rowing. One is to join the Corporate Rowing League, which is starting here in about a week and a half.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an easy way to get going. And if your company's not involved down at the river, and that's maybe a little bit too big of an ask or too big of a commitment, which it certainly could be for a lot of people because you got to get 8 people that are going to be there every week. You can't get out on the water unless you have all 8 people.
In the boat without 8 people. That's one of the prerequisites, pretty standard.
Right. So they do have monthly Learn to Row classes, and so you can start by taking one of those and just sort of move up the levels from there.
Yeah.
And,
so if you want to take the Learn to Row class, can you come by yourself? Does it have to be more than one person? You can do it on your own? That's awesome.
You can come by yourself, kind of learn the basics, and they have a lot of different programs that you can take advantage of from there if it's something that really interests you after you kind of learn the basics and how to get started. So.
And it's more of a newcomer comparatively, but the Whitewater Center does the exact same thing.
Correct.
So you can also do a corporate whitewater league, which we have also both done with less success maybe than our rowing experience, but I mean, it's definitely available. And I'm sure there are plenty of other ways to get on the rapids here in Oklahoma City if you're not part of a corporate team. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you haven't been down to the Whitewater Center yet, that is something you definitely need to check out. The Whitewater Center here, it's a very unique amenity. Not many cities in the United States have an artificial whitewater facility.
Especially not so close to downtown. That is unique to Oklahoma City.
That is absolutely.
And something very cool. So.
OKC only thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very awesome. So we've both done the whitewater course a number of times in the corporate whitewater season.
This is the time where we have to tell about our first whitewater experience. It would be a shame if we didn't.
Okay.
So Nate and I were both on the very first Chamber Whitewater corporate team. I did not last as long as Nate did. He stuck it out for the whole season. I did not. But it was also right when they launched. So I felt like the rapids were really dialed up to the highest level possible. It was a little bit frightening. So
yeah, they had them going for sure.
Tell me what happened from your perspective, and then I'll chime in since I was sitting behind you in the boat.
Okay. Well, so we're going around down the course and, having a lot of fun. And I'm sort of thinking, this is great. If I get tossed out of the boat into the rapids, it's not going to be that big of a deal,
I mean,
right?
it was a hot day, maybe. No, actually, it was really cold.
It was a pretty cold day.
It was a chilly April day, so you didn't really want to be in the water. But if it happened, I mean, it's fine. We can swim. It's totally cool.
Right.
The water's great.
Right. It's and honestly, you're wearing a helmet. You're wearing a life
You're with a professional raft guide. You're very safe.
It's very, very safe.
Yeah, and they prepared you really well. I felt like the safety training was excellent. I felt like I knew what to expect whenever I was going down the rapids for the first time. So that part was really very easy and well done.
Right, for sure. But so went down a series of rapids. Ended up going over a big bump and getting tossed out. And
now here's something they tell you very clearly: you want to stay in the boat, right? You really dig in and do not fall out at all costs. And I thought, okay, that's probably unnecessary advice, whatever.
Right.
So Nate's sitting right in front of me, and he comes barreling over the top of me. I am So I just had no choice but to follow, and we both fall in the water,
Right.
and there was no recovering for me at that point. Somehow you got back in the boat, but I had to be hauled out by someone on the side, like pulling me in as if they were doing a water rescue. It was so humiliating and a little bit scary at the time, but
Yeah.
I got back in the boat, we repeated it, went down the rapids at least 2 more times successfully, but
Yes.
that was my one and only appearance on, on the corporate whitewater league. I didn't really think I was needed on the team after that point, for sure. So, but you stuck it out, right?
Well, I stuck it out. I did. I do have to say though, my first time actually being in the water after a few mouthfuls of water and being thrown around the current a little bit was quite a bit of mortal terror.
Yeah, a little bit.
So that'll scare you into staying in the boat at all costs. So that's
When they say stay in, they mean it.
Correct.
Stay in the boat. Absolutely.
So every time that we've done the course since then, I have done my best to stay in the boat, and I have successfully. So
yeah. See, you just needed to be a little bit smarter than we were in that moment.
That experience scared me straight. But anybody that thinks that this is not legit legit rapids experience, just go ahead and check that out for yourself.
Give it a try. It's definitely adventurous,
It is.
and I think everyone should try it at least once. And if you find that it's not your speed, like it wasn't mine, they have lots of other opportunities, dive-in movies. You know, you can go watch the fun. So lots of other ways you can take advantage of it.
Yeah, they can. That's one of the cool things about it being an artificial whitewater course is that they can dial it down a little bit. They can change the rapids. They have what they call quiet hours.
Oh, nice.
At certain points in the week where you can go down on tubes.
See, that is definitely more my speed. I need to check that out. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, a little bit more relaxed, have some fun. It's not as, like I said, doesn't scare doesn't scare the out of you, if I could say that. It doesn't scare you that much, even if you were to get tossed out when they're turned
and this is a better time of year than early April probably to you know experience the whitewater rapids and maybe possibly get a little wet. So
yeah.
I think July, August would be the perfect time for me to try that again.
For sure, yeah. A lot of fun, and like we said, a great amenity to have, very unique to Oklahoma City, so definitely check it out. If you have people coming into town that maybe haven't been here for a while, that's a great place to take them. Lots of good activities to do down there. So yeah, rowing, whitewater, all good things down at the river. So.
And I think it's important to mention, you know, both the Oklahoma River improvements, the Whitewater Center, these are MAPS projects, especially as our community is kind of embarking on a lot broader discussions about the next iteration of the MAPS program. I mean, we have these things because people voted yes and decided to improve some of the quality of life amenities here in Oklahoma City. So it's a really good opportunity to take those in and take advantage of them.
For sure. After the collections for MAPS 3 ended, which was in December of 2017, or actually just prior to that, we actually voted on something that was in between MAPS 3 and MAPS 4 that was called Safer Streets, Better Oklahoma City. And so we voted on that in September of 2017, and that was actually, I believe, 10 different bond proposals and also 2 different sales tax initiatives.
And it really addressed what Oklahoma City residents are constantly saying is their number one concern in surveys every year, which is road conditions, street improvement. It really took that period of time to invest a lot of money into making streets all across Oklahoma City more drivable, more friendly for pedestrians and auto driving alike. So I think it's done a really good work, but that will conclude, those collections will conclude this year, is that right?
That's right, yeah. It was a temporary 27-month program for the sales tax portion of those street projects. So the bond projects are actually going to be going on well into the 2020s because of the way that bonds work, and you have to sell them and then bid out the jobs and so on and so forth. So those take quite a bit longer.
Right, so it'll overlap with other things.
Correct. So that is ongoing, but that, like you said, that it was intended to sort of give an extra boost to the city's ability to take care of some of the street issues that the citizens have had.
Yeah. So what's next? Now that we have that temporary sales taxes concluding, what's the next step?
You've probably been hearing a little bit about MAPS 4 already. There's been quite a bit of public conversation around MAPS 4 so far, really starting with this January was when sort of the campaign was kicked off in order to gain some ideas and to try to gauge the community's interest in doing maps again at all. And that seems to be the case, that the community is obviously very interested in continuing to invest in itself through this MAPS process, which is great.
Absolutely.
Because I think everybody is pretty much in agreement of the fact that maps has really been the primary driver of Oklahoma City's renaissance over the past 20, 25 years.
And how it invests in transformational projects. I mean, you can see the impact of what those projects have had on Oklahoma City, throughout downtown and beyond those borders for sure.
Yes. And so now we're talking about Maps 4, and so there's been a series of ideas that have really kind of come to the forefront, I think, of the conversation at this point. It's been going on for a while. And so the City Council is actually going to be hosting 4 different workshops that are coming up. And city staff and some of the groups that are proponents for some of these particular projects are going to be doing presentations in City Council chambers. And those are going to be on July 9th. July 11th, July 31st, and August 6th.
So I think it's important to note too that since they're at City Council chambers, that these will be streamed on YouTube. So if you can't get away, if you don't have time to go in person, you can definitely watch the discussion, give feedback to your elected representative that way just by watching on YouTube. So I think that's really helpful for a lot of us that can't be there in person.
For sure. And that's a really nice feature. And we actually have an article on Velocity, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes that has links to some more information and links to the city's YouTube site where you can watch that live if you'd like to, or on their channel later if that's better fits your schedule. So, but they've got some different things that they're going to talk about on the schedule, so we thought we'd just talk about that really quick.
So what's the first meeting on July 9th? What are they going to feature?
Right. So July 9th, they're going to hear a presentation about Palomar.
Okay.
And Palomar is kind of the city's family justice center.
Awesome.
So what they do is they try to get people out of domestic violence situations. And so we're going to be hearing about that. Parks in general. I think there's been some discussion around some beautification and adding some more items to some of the regular city parks around town. So
absolutely.
We're getting ready to open Scissortail Park, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but just sort of city parks in general. There are also going to be some presentations on sidewalks, bike lanes, trails, and streetlights.
So a lot of the things that were included in Maps 3, also in the Safer
Streets, Better Oklahoma City,
exactly.
Right? So kind of continuing along, doing some improvement in those areas.
Love that.
They're also going to be talking about the Freedom Center, and the Freedom Center is it's where a lot of Clara Looper's civil rights activities were based.
That's awesome.
Right, and so there's been a lot of interest, especially within the Northeast community, about helping to preserve that a little bit.
That would be very cool.
Right, and get some resources over there. So on Thursday, July 11th, they're going to be talking about youth centers,
awesome.
Beautification in general, so that's things like trees, streetscaping.
And I've heard the phrase extreme beautification.
Right.
So it's not just, maybe planting one tree. It would be something much more dramatic and impactful from what I understand.
Yes.
So it could be very cool to hear more about that.
Absolutely. There's going to be a presentation on the State Fair Coliseum. So there's been some interest in replacing the big house as it's known and what that might entail. Senior wellness centers. Senior wellness, health and wellness centers have been a very, very popular and successful part of Maps 3.
Very successful, yeah. It's just exceeded all expectations.
Yes.
So I think looking at adding more of those is definitely something we should examine.
Right. And then also maybe providing some funds for the city's animal shelter.
That's awesome.
So that's going to be discussed on the 11th. On July 31st, there's going to be some discussions about transit and maybe what a MAPS-funded program and transit might look like. Homelessness. I think that's been a big area of concern and conversation recently around town. So maybe figuring out ways that we could maybe use the MAPS process to help some of the people that are experiencing homelessness and get them out of that state and into stable housing and job situations. Chesapeake Arena and NBA enhancements. Want to make sure that Chesapeake Arena is up to NBA standards and performing the way that it should.
A lot of people forget that the reason that we have the Chesapeake Arena is, again, because of the MAPS program.
Right.
We built it originally in the first MAPS iteration. So I think it's interesting to see how far that has come and what that has brought to Oklahoma City. It's really important that we remember that for sure.
For sure, yeah. Thank you, voters, 1993.
Thanks for the thunder. We appreciate it.
And also talking about a diversion hub. So that would be a place where maybe people that are involved in the justice system could maybe get some extra help that they might need in terms of mental health resources,
addiction resources,
those types of things, rather than just putting them in jail where those problems may not necessarily be addressed.
Exactly.
So, and then on Tuesday, August 6th, there's going to be a presentation on mental health, mental health in general. There's been been some discussion about a multi-purpose stadium that would be situated around downtown.
Yeah.
That would be used for things like soccer, professional soccer, and then also possibly hosting things like high school football playoff games, the types of things that we can't currently do with the facilities that we have in Oklahoma City. There are also going to be some talk about the Innovation District.
Yeah, and the Chamber's been working on Innovation District and kind of studying how to improve that since 2015. And for those of you that aren't familiar, the Innovation District is located just northeast of downtown. So it encompasses the OU Medical Center, Stevenson Cancer Center, a lot of those medical and biotech facilities that people might be familiar with. But it also stretches all the way to Automobile Alley, so like 4th and Broadway. And I think if you are driving or walking in between those two places, you can see there's not a lot of natural connection points. I think people who work in the medical center and the Innovation District often feel a little disconnected from the rest of downtown. So it'd be interesting to see if Maps 4 could bring any kind of natural connection points for those two areas so that we can collaborate more. I think that would just bring about more innovation for everyone. So
that's kind of the idea with the Innovation District study in the first place, is really to figure out how to create connections between people and entities and really foment more entrepreneurship and
because
and
innovation it's about more than just biotech. It can be applied to all industries. So seeing how you could apply those lessons everywhere in Oklahoma City is really exciting.
Yeah, and then also other projects brought forward by council members. So if any particular council member is interested in something that hasn't been already been discussed, they're going to do some presentations on that. And so the other thing to remember is it's not necessarily the case that the final list of Maps 4 projects will be pulled from these particular topics. It's still possible that something else could surface in between now and then.
Absolutely.
But the mayor said the other day that these are the ones that have really sort of risen to the top after talking to the community and various council members. And
I think it's important to note too that there's been such a long process of collecting ideas from various groups and individuals. I know the city had a survey on their website for months soliciting ideas and feedback. And I think what we're seeing here is that people do have an appetite for programs that are impacting their neighborhoods. They have an appetite for programs that are impacting social justice and change, and also those transformational projects that have often been associated with MAPS. So it's a really exciting combination. I think it's a little different, but still in the same spirit of MAPS, and I can't wait to see what is going to be on the final ballot. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, and there's been also some talk about setting up some endowments that could be used for operational purposes, something that has actually been done before. Not a lot of people may realize that, but that's not a completely foreign concept vis-a-vis the MAPS process. But yeah, there's been some discussion about that. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
All right, we're excited to welcome Derek Sparks, the Chamber's Government Relations Manager, with us to give us a little overview of how the 2019 legislative session went. So Derek, thank you so much for being our first official podcast.
I'm honored to be here, Kaylee. Thank you for inviting me, Nate, as well. Very eventful session. I think I can characterize it as uncharted waters for us because you had an entirely new political landscape at the Capitol in the sense of a new governor who had never held elected office before. You had almost 60 legislators who were newly elected, so an historic amount of turnover at the Capitol.
I even heard that it was the most new elected officials since statehood.
Well, I believe so, and that's a combination of term limits, resignations, retirements, and so you had a tremendous amount of, and that's coming off a cycle where you had a record number of candidates run for office, and so we had to navigate these uncharted waters as a chamber, much like everyone else had to, and the name of the game was who could build the most positive relationships the quickest, really, and we had a lot of strategies for doing that. It was, our political action committee allows us to meet many candidates before they're elected, delivering them a contribution. But we had meetings with the governor-elect. We had meetings with him after he was governor, Governor Stitt. We had the lieutenant governor in. We had the governor's chief of staff in. There was a real concerted effort, and I think one of the most successful things we did was to have a freshman-only legislator reception so that we could have our leadership become introduced to the new members, and we had 30 of the roughly 60 attend, and so a very high number.
That's really amazing statistic, honestly.
It was really helpful to us because a number of those people we had never actually engaged with until that evening. And through the normal lobbying process and legislative process, we got to know, I would say, all but maybe a half dozen or so, at least we had a verbal interaction with and worked with. But that was really the nature of the new session. And I think also the positive budget that we had coming in, we'd suffered from a number of years of budget shortfalls. And in that environment, you're playing defense, you're not really asking for anything, you're trying to protect, for example, the incentives we use to attract companies here. Infrastructure, spending. You're trying to ward off bad things. And in this session, we had a little more ability to ask for things. For example, we asked for a major software cyber engineering tax credit program, and typically we're defending those, which we did successfully protect the ones we use. But to ask for one requires a very positive environment, and we were able to achieve that, I think, because of the combination of open-minded new legislators who are wanting to grow the state, but also a positive revenue environment where they're not looking to cut. We could actually grow and address some issues that you can't do when there's a budget shortfall.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that new incentive and talk about how that came to be, because I know we had a lot of feedback from the business community about that specific issue.
This was a long-term workforce need for the state, a very severe shortage of the jobs exist, but the mechanism to put people in those positions didn't exist. And we'd noted through our economic development team for a number of years, and the most prominent example is Tinker Air Force Base needing 11 to 1,200 new engineers, high-tech jobs, and quite frankly, this incentive touches so many other industries. It's not just a Tinker measure. However, that was a huge impetus for us to position Tinker well for the future. But, you're talking about banking, agribusiness, energy, aerospace, huge industries in the state that depend on people to use their computer engineering expertise, and then cybersecurity, the protecting companies from major losses there. And so we embarked on this really with a specific goal in mind of how do we incentivize a Oklahoma graduate or an individual in the marketplace, both here or out of state, to come and take these jobs. And we achieved that. It's $2,200 for each year over 7 years if you have a bachelor's degree or higher, but there's also the piece of an $1,800 benefit to you if you have a certification from an Oklahoma Career Tech. And I would say, I think significantly, the most incentives go to the employer. This one is unique because it actually goes to the employee.
Yes.
And so that's a monumental difference, which actually makes us unique in the nation at this point. And that goes into effect November the 1st. But that's just one example. There were many fronts that we competed well on. I think if you look at things that didn't happen, there was a bad workers' comp bill to begin with that was going to roll back some of the major 2013 reforms. That outcome was actually positive in a number of areas. Medical marijuana, you recall, and just recently the Oklahoma people voted to basically allow medical marijuana. Well, there was very much vagueness and ambiguity in that in terms of workplace protections, drug-free workplaces, and those were addressed within the measure that came out this session. Constitutional carry, Governor Stitt had said on the campaign trail that he was going to sign that bill, and so a lot of efforts were put in, certainly by the Chamber's leadership, to make sure that there were protections in there for business and property owners, given the inevitability of what he was going to do. And I would compliment Mark Van Landingham, our senior VP, who's not present here, for his work leading the coalition and all the things that went on there positively. That prevented a bunch of other gun measures from getting across the line. And so
and those things are important in terms of keeping high impact
Absolutely.
high economic impact events, sporting events, the Thunder, those types of
Absolutely,
things.
that's a great point. And in fact, I think if you look at it with the NCAA, with the NBA, with horse shows, all those groups don't allow contractually guns into their events. There just weren't any teeth in the law, and it was very important that, not to oppose the Second Amendment, that's not the point. It was just an unreasonable,
make sure businesses have their rights recognized.
Exactly,
well.
an unreasonable expansion that leads to liability issues, and worked really hard on that front. I think another area I would, the fact that we were able to protect all the incentives was very important. And then government reform. This was a new item because Governor Stitt came in saying that he wanted to really empower the governor's position institutionally and to give himself more ability to appoint agency heads, because for long they've been kind of unaccountable to anybody who's governor, and those were achieved. I mean, the 5 major agencies he'll be able to appoint. Also, there was board, trust, and commission reform, where the governor, the pro tem, and the speaker have appointment authority over folks. I saw that manifest at the ODOT commission meeting, where you saw a whole new range of individuals, and they were gubernatorially appointed House and Senate appointees. It's changed the landscape. They also created a Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, LOFT for short, which will help them with their budget numbers and reconcile those at the Capitol. And so, I mean, for a first-term governor who had never held office before, I think would get high marks on many of those fronts. There were a couple of areas that are still 50-50. He did sign a bad alcohol bill in our estimation that really has a lot of impact on the distributorship and distributing liquor within the state question that passed. That's currently in the courts. We're optimistic that there's a chance it could be held unconstitutional. Also, there's a pharmacy benefit managers issue that has to do with healthcare expenses for businesses. He vetoed one bill but signed the other. That's going to be a legal challenge. And so, those were kind of on the margins, but overall, I think we had a very, very successful session. One thing I would point out too, infrastructure funding, we've played catch up over 20 years on this. Even though we've funded it, had a huge backlog. We fully funded the 8-year plan from ODOT and protected the Heartland Flyer, passenger rail, and so those are really positive outcomes for the chamber.
So speaking of the Heartland Flyer, we actually have a good story on the history of the Heartland Flyer and kind of how it came to be. This is its 25th anniversary.
Yeah, I was going to say
20th, 1990th anniversary.
Anniversary.
So we've got a good story about that, and the point this month, and so we're going to be posting on AudaCity, so we'll put a link to that in the show notes, so definitely check that out. The Heartland Flyer is great if you haven't had a chance to take
amazing.
it.
Oh yeah.
I would love for you to talk a little bit too about criminal justice reform. That's something that the chamber has been so involved in for several years. What was happening at State Capitol this year on those issues?
Yeah, that's an extremely important issue. I'm glad you brought it up on the list of things we do. Criminal justice is vital. We're involved because of the jail. We've also seen, we've got to fix the statewide system in terms of the jail. It's a fiscal issue. It unites the right and left. But now the district attorneys have gotten involved in the bail bondsmen, and there's opposition to some of the changes, and it's been a little more of a difficult course. However, we did get a major bill through that would make State Question 780 retroactive. That was very important, but we've got more of the journey to go on here. The path we knew would be more treacherous as we went along, but there's a lot of positives, in terms of the bipartisan support. The governor, we believe, supports this issue. We don't have a choice. I mean, if we're going to be, as he says, a top 10 state, you don't really want to be number 1 in incarceration in men and women in the United States. That's being top 10 in the wrong category.
That's exactly
and
what
so
we
I
don't
think,
want.
I believe there's a recognition of that whether folks oppose specific bills or not, there's a broad understanding that we can't keep going down the same path. That'll lead us to have to build more prison facilities, which $1 for that is $1 siphoned off from core functions of government.
Right. Exactly.
And so, it's a great, and I think, we've been very active, and, Roy's engaged in some statewide, Roy Williams is engaged in some statewide efforts there as well. So the chamber has been deeply engaged, and will continue to be. On that front.
And we've actually got a pretty good story on kind of how things are going at the state level on as far as criminal justice reform goes in the point this month, and we'll have a link to that on Velocity as well, so we'll put that in the show notes. Also put some links in the show notes to our Smart Safe criminal justice site, so that kind of details a little bit of background on the chamber's involvement in this area, the criminal justice area.
And it also has
locally.
the Bureau report that went over the conditions in the Oklahoma County Jail, which kind of led to the work that the chamber's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll put that in the show notes.
Excellent. That's very positive. We got to keep getting that across that this is an important priority for the state.
Yes.
There as well.
So Derek, to close, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing now to prepare for the next session, because even though it's over, I know you guys are still working on pro-business advocacy. So what does that look like for you in the off season, if you will?
That's an excellent question. We don't just retire to the golf course whenever the session's over. We're actually turning the page to think about the next year, 2020, which will be a momentous year in many ways. And we begin to build our agenda, our playbook, that we have a very dedicated process. And so in the summer, we start to really plug into decision makers, opinion leaders. We do a survey as a chamber of businesses to help tell us what are the pressing issues. We will meet with senior leadership at the state, with the governor's staff and many others, to determine what's their agenda going to be and how can the chamber align with some of the things that are where should we be on these issues. It's really more art than science in the sense of interpreting. We want to be successful at our objectives, and we have an actual committee process that goes from dedicated committees on transportation, healthcare, education, through a steering committee to the executive committee and the board. And I would say one of our great strengths as an organization is that we do have very, very successful business leaders who take their time to really study and look at where we're at as a chamber on these issues, and they evaluate our success level on these areas. And so we have a lot of very smart and prominent eyes on our issues to make sure that we're on the right page at the Capitol. But that's what we're doing now, and I think that it is unique. It's not an election year. Last year we were very busy with trying to navigate all the mini election races, but this year we're going to be able to, also I should mention, we're going to be continuing to build those relationships that we started at the Capitol. It doesn't stop when the legislature adjourns. We find other ways to work with these folks and to have them come here or to go visit them, and it's always helpful to go to their community. I've been to Guyman before, for example. Mark's been to Durant. I mean, we go across the state to you really get to know these folks, and they remember it. And so those are some of the things we're going to be doing, and I think that builds toward, it's kind of the practice builds toward the success when we actually are in our competition season. And so we're excited about it, and I think we can build on the momentum that we've had this session and keep working with the new leadership of the state to move Oklahoma and Oklahoma City forward. So awesome. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Derek. We appreciate your time and for the rundown of the last session.
Thank you very much.
So you guys may have seen the big announcement last week that Kings of Leon are actually going to be hosting a concert to help kick off the opening of Scissortail Park.
Which is important to note. Yeah.
September 27th. So that's very, very cool.
I know. I mean, I was already excited about Scissortail Park. I think it's going to bring so much to downtown Oklahoma City. It's going to bring so much for every person, resident of Oklahoma City and visitor alike. So this free concert is really, I mean, they're taking it to the next level, basically in their opening weekend, to have a massive concert. I think they said that their Grand Lawn can hold more than 15 to 20,000 people.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly how many people will be in that crowd, but I'm excited to see how it plays out. And of course, having an Oklahoma band be the first one to kick off this new venue, this new park for us is really exciting. I can't wait.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very good get, huge name, and they've got a worldwide following.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It's very,
people
very
have
cool.
been tweeting tweeting at them like, oh, let's road trip to Oklahoma City. We're going to come for this free concert. So it's interesting to see, how big that reach has been.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people coming in from out of town to see that show. So that's going to be cool. But we should try to we should try to get out there for that and experience that.
Maybe we'll do a live vlog from there. We'll see.
Possibly.
We'll see if we're brave enough to do that.
Right. So we did a fun little kind of state of the construction video right about a year ago, just to show how far along things have come.
Right.
And since then, obviously, things have come a lot further in terms of construction.
I mean, you can really see the landscaping taking place. All of the construction is so much further along. And I mean, the physical structure of the park and all of the amenities are much more visible now if you just walk out or drive out and see it. So it's something, I mean, they're making great progress.
You can really see what's going on. And if you're watching this on video, then you're seeing some shots of the current construction that we took just this week. So yeah, that's great.
And if you're not watching this on video, you can check that out on our YouTube page. Thanks for joining us for our second episode of AudaCity, an Oklahoma City show. And we're so glad that you were here. I hope you enjoyed all that we had to share about the cool things that are happening in Oklahoma City right now.
Yeah, please come back and see us. If you have feedback, there are a couple ways to give that to us. The first and easiest is really to just email us at networking@okcchamber.com, or if you prefer to reach out to us via social media, that's generally OKC Chamber on any of your preferred social media platforms.
And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or watching on YouTube, make sure that you leave us a rating, leave us a review, subscribe. On YouTube, you can just ring the bell to get notifications when we post the next episode.
Tell your
that
friends.
helps us reach more people, so please do that. We'd appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.